Along those lines, thanks. So this is a creative action that's happening. This is an installment of a series of conversations based upon a conversation that Tracy Heilers, who is the founder of the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully, along with others, but the primary suspect, we came up with a question. And the question is, when we're practicing mindfulness, one of the powerful experiences that you usually have at some point when you're practicing meditation is you're asking yourself, what's really going on here? I'm sitting here, I'm paying attention to my thoughts, I'm paying attention to my feelings, I'm having these, but what's really happening? And that's a powerful thing. That's a powerful question to ask for anyone in the world. That's the birth of awareness, perhaps. And consciousness, which is a word that Dr. Iyengar, Radhika Iyengar, who's here with us, and I really hit when we were in our conversations around mindfulness in relationship to some of the great challenges that we're facing in the world, particularly as articulated by the Sustainable Development Goals that were brought about by the United Nations and units within the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, under the work of the great world global economists, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. So Tracy and I wanted to use this word praxis, as in the actions that we take on the external world or in the external world to bring into existence a more harmonious solution to the challenges that we face. So this is I think the fifth installment, and I'm really honored to have you here, Dr. Iyengar, to help me understand what is really going on here with this question that I have, and I put it to you, the role of mindfulness in assisting passionate people who want to embrace difficult and challenging problems, both in the sciences and in the arts that the human species is facing on this planet. So these challenges, mindfulness, and particularly goal number 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is health and well-being. And you and I have talked about what do we mean when we say things like social emotional learning in that context. And this is the container that I'm presenting to you, Doctor, and I'm inviting you to, we can begin and you can ask me any clarifying questions, but what is your response to this in terms of your own experience of mindfulness in your life and how you see this work in connection to, and I hope you will tell us about it, your own activity to confront some of the challenging problems that we're facing in mindful and not mindless ways. So welcome, and how are you?
Thank you so much, Barnaby, and thank you so much, Tracy, for giving me this platform to discuss something that Barnaby and I happened to have a discussion, and we are like, there are things, so many things in common that were coming up that I was just surprising how our journeys were making us go towards a particular path. And at least I don't have answers to, but I can explain my journey in this series and this discussion today. So what I've been noticing is that let's take COVID-19. We are recovering from COVID, and there were a lot of people who were in India who were traveling from one place to the other, and my sister over there developing like a community kitchen to serve all these migrant laborers. And in New Jersey, there were my neighbors and some people, my kids' class parents and other parents came together, and some of them were baking cakes, the other one was baking muffins. They were selling them, giving the money to me so that that money can go towards the community kitchen that my sister was doing for migrant laborers in India. So very different context, but there was something about this whole connectedness that came together, and how people felt about each other's journey and about the pain that other country people are suffering. And I thought that that was such a beautiful way of getting humanity together on a particular cause or a particular case where people have really not seen each other and maybe have not visited the country, but there was something connecting between New Jersey and India. And what was that? That was humanity. That was being mindful of the pain and of the suffering that other fellow human beings were facing at that time. Then again, the economy went back and everything is fine. But I felt that why do we want to have a crisis to bring in this aspect of humanity and mindfulness? Do we really have to have a pandemic? Do we really have to have a climate crisis to make everyone come together? For example, there was this Ida storm. I don't know if you remember last year. There were a lot of waterlogging in my downtown area in New Jersey. And again, there were a lot of people. It was a colossal mess. The shops were all flooded, and high school students and their moms grouped together to clean up their shops. They were cleaning with the hands, and then they were putting all these debris outside because the Rave River had gone inside with all its fury and destroyed all the shops. So again, there was this climate disaster, and then everyone came together. So now, are we waiting for another disaster to come to have humanity come together? I think this human beings are connected, and why don't we use that connection in our schools, in our classrooms? If you've seen a kindergartner walk with the mother, she or he will stop. My kindergartner stops every other minute and says, Mama, look at this. And it will be like one stone. And I'm like, what is the fascination with this stone? Then she will go another 10 steps and she'll be like, Mama, this tree or something will distract. And there were so many things that they see, that when we grow up, when we are in grade, my sixth grader will not notice any of this, and she'll be like, oh, come on, let's go, and let's go ahead. So we have educated out of that connectedness that we feel towards each other, towards the climate. And why is this really happening? And when we talk of emotions with climate, it's always bad emotions. It's basically anxiety, it's depression, it's stress, and people feel disempowered. We don't know what to do with the climate. And I think that's the last resort. Students are now outside in the streets striking, and that's the mode of, they are upset and angry, and they have all these negative emotions. I think we have let them be that because we have not addressed their emotions positively throughout their education. So I think that's something that has bothered me, and I feel that we are giving them information about climate and not really learning how to be in nature with all their emotions so that they can feel connected and save something that they are connected to. Otherwise, it seems like it is a journey where we are saying, okay, now you have to save the world, and they have many other priorities, and it's really not going, the education that we are providing is not going in the right direction. So as you had mentioned earlier about I'll maybe share my screen here, about sustainable development goals. And I just want to mention something about the happiness work that I've been doing, which is with the Global Happiness Council. These are some of the policy briefs that we had worked on as education. You can see all the resilience and other themes coming up. I was with my colleagues, I worked on education and well-being as a way of dealing with or having a way of surviving COVID and becoming more resilient. And what have we discussed? We have been basically discussing how we can work with social emotional learning to provide that bridge between education that we are providing and the mental status. And that is the SEL, social emotional learning, becomes the bridge as an education tool in our education system. I want to share a couple of slides here. You mentioned sustainable development goal. Can you see the slide? It says feeling for
Yes.
climate.
Yeah.
It's
I see
basically,
the COVID-19 slide right now, policy brief one.
oh no, so let me stop sharing because I was sharing my screen, my PowerPoint. Basically looking at sustainable development goals and their connection with what we have been doing so far. So SDG 4.7 It's
Yes.
really, if you see the meaning of SDG 4.7, it talks of human rights, gender equality, peace, non-violence, all things that are good. This should be the purpose of education. And of course, well-being is a big part of it, SDG goal 3. We have been working with mission 4.7 to discuss global citizenship education, which is another form of bringing humanity and connectedness. We are connected to each other. And then education for sustainable development, which is also talking about how do we bring in climate education and environmental education with meet 4.7. So here is a couple of things that I was working on with the happiness council work, that I was saying that, people think that that happiness is a very limited construct, and it talks about human happiness. And but it's really a couple of authors here that I want to mention, which they link education for sustainable development and happiness and well-being together. And I think we need to, in this journey, we need to have some reference to what is the meaning of happiness. And they are saying that sustainable happiness is basically looking at education that should be contributing towards personal and collective happiness that does not exploit others, the environment, or future generations. So they are connecting happiness and well-being, personal happiness and well-being, which is what we are used to defining our happiness is, with sustainability and a sense of responsibility of how we must treat happiness and what happiness depends on. It depends on not exploiting other people and the environment. And then some others have mentioned that it also leads to emotional development and leads to cooperative and compassionate societies. And these emotions must be addressed in schools. And right now, what we are seeing is that these emotions are really not addressed in schools, and then they become anxiety and stress and other things. And we don't get a chance to be connected with what we are trying to solve. We are trying to become
Yeah.
technocrats.
Can I,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, please.
this is so rich and full. Um, one of the things that I want to highlight for all, and you don't have to stop sharing it. I'd like, if it's
Yeah, no,
wonderful if you want to
yeah,
continue,
yeah.
but is that I'm thinking of the organization called the Greater Good Organization, and the gentleman who runs that, who recently wrote the book on awe, AWE, like going on awe walks, and the practice of taking in the world. We are almost being severed from that. It's that concept of toxic automaticity, and the science of happiness and the science of social emotional learning. One of the things that comes up for me is that in higher education and in secondary education, this social emotional learning is usually like a one-off or a separate thing. And what I see in your work is an opportunity for students and makers and creators and thinkers and problem solvers and activists to get some kind of support that they need desperately when they are in the work, not away from social emotional learning or well-being, but almost learning how to be in their bodies in a comfortable way when they're facing a difficult situation, so that we don't have people getting up and walking away from tables, even world leaders, and saying, well, then we'll just solve this by dropping bombs on each other. It's like, this is not tenable, this way of thinking. And then, the way you're articulating happiness. So I want to just encourage anybody who listens to this, either it's happening live or when you listen to it further, is mindfulness, as we are using it for the process of this conversation. And we should have done a little practice, but we can do a little practice before we end this evening. Mindfulness is a learned practice where you can learn how to pay attention to what is happening in the present moment, paying attention on purpose in a particular way to what arises in the present moment that you find yourself in. and to allow that to be without judging it, without reacting with fear or excitement, but noticing it and paying attention. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in a particular way to what arises in the present moment without judging. And this seems to go right to the heart of the answer to the question regarding what is going on here with mindfulness in our culture. Why are we just trying to create obedient, compliant people who will take the boot in their face or their circumstances in life and mindfully, go within and simply not take action to bring into existence a world that wants to be, which is going to include solving difficult problems that not solving hinder all of us in our life. And so I'm just sort of riffing off of what you have been saying, Dr. Iyengar. I'm excited about this because my mindfulness practice is helping me to pay attention to the fact that this work is moving in to university systems and higher education as it is. And it's not going to live, in my opinion, if it's just something to help children regulate themselves. Mindfulness needs to be something that helps children move out from their health and well-being within themselves and move out and into very messy situations that require us to be able to stay with a problem and not run away from it. What comes up in you or anybody else, and Audrey or Rachel or Tracy, what comes up in you as we have this? Feel free to chime in a bit. And certainly, Dr. Iyengar, you were going to say something. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was saying, Barnaby, that you are so right in terms of saying that we have an uncertain future. But being mindful of our activities and being mindful of our emotions, I think is a journey that it happened to me because of environmental reasons. So I have a very personal connection between mindfulness and the environment. I was seeing a lot of, climate. I was going through this, climate anxiety phase, and then pandemic happened, and we know it's because
as a child.
No, and now recently with the
Yeah.
pandemic and people dying, and I was getting very emotionally upset that I'm not able to do much, and plus environment related work was not going in the right direction. And I was thinking that it's really to be able to be a good change agent, I need to be at peace with myself to be able to act positively. And it required, as you're saying, it doesn't come naturally. You have to train your mind to be present and to be thinking in the right direction. And there will be thoughts, there will be other things, but you have to let them go, and be focused on things that you can be a part of. You can be a part of solution. So and then I was reading a lot of articles on how can this be done in schools. So I looked at this whole idea of positive education, which is talking about social emotional learning, but in a very transformative way, in a very positive way, in a light where if you have emotional, if you have, so we can bring in positive emotions, and there is there is this connection that we can actually do in the classrooms, and then through pluralistic approaches where we give students spaces to critically evaluate their own values, habits, norms. I think these are the core things that we need to be doing in schools, so that we can reflect on our own activities, being mindful of our own activities, see how we can build a consensus together, and provide a sense of, have some sort of a, communication model and come up with solutions together. So it's not like a very insular approach. It is, you have to work with communities, you have to work together with people. And so this whole idea of take all the positive emotions that you have, empathy, gratitude, all the things that we saw in the COVID example, humanity, being mindful, ask questions, and then you critically, and then there is space in the school where you are being in discussions with other students, come up with things together. We are I think are able to come up with, this is probably a good way of having democracy and not having a dictatorship, or not having a, some sort of a person driving the whole thing. And we are practicing, if we are able to practice all of this in schools, then we are building a much more democratic society, much more, mindful society. And what are we addressing? We are addressing our own happiness and well-being, communities happiness and well-being, as well as all the symptoms that we see around justice, social justice issues, social injustices, climate injustices. I think this is where we need to be addressing all of those aspects, rather than looking at, again, solutions that are symptoms, not really getting at the core issues here. So I
Mm.
don't know if you have any reflections on this approach.
And folks, if you don't feel like you want to talk out loud, you can write in the chat, or you can just jump right in. I just have to say for myself, and I want to make sure I note it, and for all of us, and for people who are listening down the line, this is very exciting to me, because there's a lot of critical feedback coming to those of us who are very excited about mindfulness in our society. And the critical feedback is coming from people saying, not so fast. You need to be mindful about mindfulness as well. And mindfulness can be instrumentalized and utilized by corporations or governments can be co-opted and can be used in ways that have nothing to do with a sense of human connection or working with difficult problems. And so that's why people are very critical, when Google or Apple say they want to bring in mindfulness practices, or they want to, we read something about putting a chip in somebody's brain so that they can notice when they're not on their professional task and get back to it. And so people are very critical of that. And so, and that, we are living in a world right now. Never thought it would happen in my lifetime. My parents told me it probably wouldn't happen, or that it could happen, but it probably wouldn't. Where even in our own country, we see totalitarian thinking, totalitarian policy making. We see some things reemerging around authoritarianism and totalitarian thinking that is dangerous. And a concern is that even mindfulness could be used for, wherever you have human beings, you have the potential of human beings weaponizing the very thing that's been offered as something that could help us. So what I'm excited about is you bring into this conversation these pluralistic approaches. The word pluralism has become very important to me, where my understanding of that word is all truths are welcome. There's not just one way, there are many ways. All voices need to be heard in a way that is democratic and that provides people who are excited about mindfulness a public space to receive critical feedback. We need to not be afraid of that. We need to embrace it and use it to help us go even deeper into, and I feel you do this with this graph here and with your work, help us begin to understand how mindfulness can be sort of the ally or the champion or the thought partner or the connector for us as alienated, isolated, fear-based human beings who need help in some kind of a strategy or practice that is secular and non-sectarian, but that doesn't threaten anybody's particular religious or ideological point of view, so that we can come together as human beings and find solutions to complex problems. And if that has to be called a social emotional learning skill, so be it. But you are putting words to it and images to it. How do you feel about what I'm saying, particularly in terms of the criticisms around mindfulness?
I
And
think, Barnaby, I want to also, I don't know, it's a little bit of a critique for the United States. And if I'm allowed to say that, I think here I find it a very individualistic society, and there is no real connections as like communities. As a community together, we don't do many activities, and we are in this kind of a, I guess, individualistic society that has to manage. The idea is that if you have a emotional turmoil, you manage it on your own. You get a counselor and you manage it.
if you can afford one.
If you can afford one, or the schools will give like a huge, some discussion on some psychologists coming and saying this is how you manage emotions. It's all stress and time management and other things. I think that is a band-aid version of you put a, like SEL is used like a band-aid. You have a problem, you fix it. SEL is much more, I guess it's a system driving thing, which we have not been able to use the full potential of. And I'm very shocked to see that we don't refer to UNESCO's frameworks on social emotional learning and education, and so how sustainable development goals are connected. UNESCO has worked on this 2017 report on learning outcomes, and each SDG is divided between what we can learn as behavioral, cognitive, and social emotional. I think social emotional is not like, if you have a problem, you use the social emotion. It is for everyone. It is for, if that's the premise that we need to have for us to be having a confidence about, your own self, and having the right attitude to learn. And we are just underplaying it so much that it is just used as like a quick fix. It is not a quick fix, and it is not individually driven. It is to be done collectively and with, with full consciousness, being as mindful human beings, so that we don't impact with our actions, don't have any impacts on non-human beings as well as non-living beings, and as well as living beings. I think that needs to be coming somewhere, and I'm not sure where this is. I just want to give you some examples of how we are treating climate here in. So for example, here I did some analysis to see, very preliminary, to see
Now,
New Jersey
yes, this was
climate
very
education
interesting. This
assessment.
was the New Jersey. You were looking at you were using the state of New Jersey as sort of the case study, right?
Yes, and I'm looking at the climate core ideas that they have, and social emotional learning comes, and this is by grade bands, okay, elementary, middle, and high school. How many times social emotional learning has come up in the curriculum, and we see a cognitive overload. We know that all this cognitive part doesn't improve anything on climate behavior. There's no impact with a overload of cognitive knowledge into behavior change whatsoever. People are getting high dose of how humans have disrupted the climate. Okay, that's like really again the anxiety part. Obviously there are many high schoolers who know about this, and there's high reference of human impact, negative human impact on climate. It's there, but the social emotional part, it's like only 15% or 12%. I'm sure we can do more. Similarly, on the climate hub, I see social emotional part coming up to be only 2.76%. Searchable tags by subject are is tagged to social emotional, whereas we have sciences as 21, earth sciences and spaces as 12, social studies as 13. And what do we gain out of this? And I'm trying to match the UNESCO's social emotional attributes that are important for, as for education. And then there are a lot of things that are missing in the New Jersey standards. I feel that showing sensitivity, empathy, experience sense of belonging, envision sustainable lifestyles, creating a vision, question oneself, which is goes back to pluralistic approaches and being mindful.
Mhm.
Why are all these missing? Identify biases, which is what we were discussing about pluralistic spaces. These are not given importance in the New Jersey standards, which I feel New Jersey is one of the pioneers or states where we have
No,
adopted climate education. Imagine
that's
all the
not
other
even. We're not
states.
even talking about Florida now. We're just talking about New Jersey.
Imagine. And so I guess my couple of things that I wanted to highlight, and we can discuss this if I'm going in the right direction, and this
Yeah,
is a work in progress.
yeah.
Barnaby, is that we know that cognitive emotional aspects, I mean, sorry, we know that cognitive abilities do not drive the collective action that we need. And if we need to be connected to something to save it. So if we are not feeling connected to something, we can, that can be one of the things on our table, and it can fall off easily because that's not something that I will prioritize. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, eco anxiety is real, but that's like really the last resort, and we have not channeled that emotion, collective emotion. I don't want to have any kind of individualistic go and get a counselor idea here, because this eco anxiety is on a mass scale. We need to really control it before more strikes and more. And we have also accepted the fact that it's fine for students to strike outside and not attend schools for climate, which I feel is we are failing as an education system, that students have to go out and strike and demand for things that we are not doing in the schools. This is just not done at all. And then also something that we, again, as I was mentioning, this pluralistic approaches, I think it will be nice to have those approaches so that we can build a community wide consensus on climate issues. And so there is a big connection for me with SEL and climate. If you are mindful, you will be mindful of your own actions. You will be mindful of not being have racial discriminations, socioeconomic discriminations. You will not be doing things that are climate have a climate impact, negative climate impact. So I think it goes together, and it is a high time that we use social emotional learning to develop in individual character, as well as sow the seeds of a democratic society, as you're saying, through these approaches that are very SEL focused. So those are some of my directions. I think you and I agree on this, but I think definitely we can expand on these ideas to take them forward. I'm looking forward to your comments, and Tracy, Audrey, Rachel's comment to take this
I,
forward.
it's amazing. Tracy, did you want to say anything? Or are you just taking it in? Yeah. See, I have to admit, I had a little bit of a head start with Radhika, and so I've had a couple conversations with her, so I've been digesting things. I see my wife's name there, and Rachel, I don't know if you're listening, but
I'm listening.
She's in the other room, so I'm not. Okay.
I'm listening.
All right. Yeah, she's listening. She's going to be happy to hear this, because see, I see exactly where the issue is in my own life. Rachel is very clear about where the compost food goes to be composted, very clear about where the cardboard and plastic goes for the recycling, and very clear about where the trash goes. And yet, here I am facilitating this conversation, but who's the one who struggles with this the most in my daily life? Me. Yes, Audrey, Uncle Barnaby struggles with this issue. And Rachel, who understands this and is able to integrate it into her behavior on a daily basis, is also able to, handle my emotional, mental struggle with this simple thing. So I want you to know I see you, sweetheart, and I'll continue to work on this. But this is what I'm appreciating, because this is where it must occur in our ordinary, imperfect daily lives. We need to enter into a deeper, meaningful relationship with our behavior and asking ourselves questions about it. I'm wondering, it's 7:42. We usually
Can I say something?
Yes, please. Uh-oh.
No. I was just going to comment that social emotional learning in general, in my opinion, needs to be incorporated within the content areas in schools. And the data that you showed, it separated social emotional learning. And I think that what Barnaby's saying is true of many Americans anyway. I think that it's easy to not compost. It's easy to have things go on the way they've always been, because people don't want to do extra. And in some ways that definitely involves being mindful. But I think that if things like these habitual lessons can be practiced in all subject areas all the time and woven into the curriculum skillfully, I think it would make more of an impact over time.
Mhm. And you're absolutely right, Rachel. So in New Jersey, the climate core ideas are being integrated into all subjects, which is a great, start that they are all there. I was looking at social emotional learning across all subjects. So basically looking at how many times social emotional learning has come up to understand it in the integrated fashion. But clearly I'm seeing that there's a lot of cognitive abilities, lot of behavioral abilities.
So I wanted to, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm very sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Cognitive, by cognitive, what you mean is kids are just being given information
Yes.
and facts, but they're not being provided with the kinds of things, Rachel, that I think you're talking about, the social, emotional time and space that they require to integrate what they know into understanding with their hearts and bodies in ways that make them not afraid to see this. I see the thumbs up. There we go. So
Yes.
that's it right there. I think we're scaring the hell out of our children right now with the best of intentions, telling them what's happening, and they're like, I first, and they're not responding to what we're cognitively saying. They're looking at our behavior. They see that we're having panic attacks in the classroom. There have been studies done about the trauma that children experience from adults in school buildings, just from that collective anxiety in the adults around something that they feel the kids need to know. What did you want to say, Rach?
I just wanted to just say one more thing, that I think that this understanding and this practice is it's so much more effectively carried out by kids. And I just see it like, once you expose kids to this, it's really the adults that have the problems maintaining, supporting, reassuring. But kids, once you give them this kind of understanding of what's happening, and maybe giving them some experience cleaning up the plastic around the beaches, in the water, and telling them about compost and telling them about these things, I think that they are more inclined to just start the habit of doing. It's the adults that don't.
Well, Miss Jacobs, as the youngest person, if you haven't gone to sleep yet, not that you would, what's your take? Do you agree or disagree? Or what's coming up for you?
Yeah, good question. I was actually just having a nice conversation with some friends last night, and one of them is a human rights lawyer for PepsiCo. And she was basically saying that she has a hard time navigating her life because she spends so much time thinking about the terrible human rights abuses that went through getting the things that she interacts with every day to her space. And we, I think as young adults are all sort of feeling a bit of existentialism and in the way that we navigate the world. And it's hard to not feel that anxiety. And I think one thing that brings me to feel very compelled towards the education practice is that my value to myself and in trying to find a career that suits me is being able to learn all the time. So I think my Aunt Rachel's comments about children being the ones to instruct is insightful, and not so far off some of my most favorite philosophers who might even claim that those children are just literally closer to some sort of enlightenment than adults.
Well, you get the thumbs up from Aunt Rachel. So there you have it. I'm just proud of you. I'm for Clem, talk amongst yourselves. But Tracy, you know what this reminds me of? There's a wonderful film called, is it May I Be Happy? Or May You Be Happy? It came out, and in that film, a meditation teacher named Vinnie Ferraro, who works and teaches mindfulness to children, says a beautiful thing towards the end of the film. He says, and it confirms what we've all been talking about in terms of children grasping this more easily, more effectively, this thing that we're talking about, than adults do, because adults are more armored up. Vinny says that it's harder for adults to take off all the armor, to dismantle all of the toxic automaticity and the ways of being in the world. And children are actually, as you were saying, Radhika, with your young ones, more open to the world, and more open to experiencing it and letting it in. It's 7:49, and I would like to propose that we do a little mindfulness practice so that we take a little taste of it, to sort of note this. And we all know where we all are, and we all know where the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully is in the internet, and you can contact us and email your thoughts and your feelings, and you can look at these talks. But what we can always do, and the thing that children understand well, harder for us to do as adults, is we can pause right in the very middle of this conversation. We can pause and we can go, wow, that was a lot of even when it's powerful, beautiful information that you're happy to see about the work that Dr. Iyengar is doing about mindful schools and the Coalition of Schools and the Conference of Coalition Schools, and, you know, seeing our family being in community together. There's still that can still be paused. And in the very midst of this, we can come to a place, and I would invite you to join me, of just coming to a place of stillness and silence where we are in our homes. You could sit comfortably right now in your chair. You can feel your feet on the ground. And so this is the beginning of me doing a guided mindfulness practice where I'm just saying, okay, I'll be the lead for this one. Let's just take a nice seat wherever we are. Nothing we have to do in particular, but just give ourselves permission to sit in a comfortable position. And we like to teach children this sense of putting your feet on the ground so you feel your feet connected to the earth beneath you. And it's not a question of sit still and be quiet. We don't want to say that to children. We want to invite them to investigate what it feels like when we let ourselves be still. We can, what is stillness? We can investigate it. And what really is silence? So it's not be quiet, it's investigate this. And so we're relaxed, and our spine sort of extends up towards the ceiling as if there's a string gently lifting our spine up so that we feel our feet on the ground, our seat is in the chair, but our spine is extending up towards the sky, and our head is like the tip of a mountain. And we have this sense of joining sky above and earth below. And here we are, human being, abiding just for a moment in our own space of stillness and silence. And then what happens? We breathe. And you could simply notice how you breathe. Notice the inhale and the exhale. And I invite you to just be curious about this experience. It's an invitation to just explore what happens for you when you allow stillness, allow silence, allow a relaxed, comfortable seat, and give yourself permission to breathe as you breathe. Noticing how the inhale begins, how it ends, the little pause before the beginning of the exhale. And even consider the idea of focusing your mind on your breathing. You might notice there's a rhythmic sensation of the breath coming in and out. You might notice where you feel it in your body. And you could just allow that to be. And you could just calmly just be there with that. Just for a few breaths. And as you sit, you might notice that there are thoughts, a thought about something that happened a minute ago, or 5 hours ago, or 5 years ago, or a thought about what's going to happen tomorrow or in 10 minutes. We have thoughts. They come and we can notice them. And we can notice how they come and we can notice how they go. Sort of like clouds across the sky. And then we can bring our focus back to our breathing. In fact, if we feel that we get too far away into a thinking or into a feeling, we can always come back to the breath. It's like an anchor for the ship. Sometimes we have emotions, whole seas of emotions. We might be sailing through a storm. Sometimes when we practice mindfulness or when we sit, we notice feelings of sadness or anger or excitement. And we can notice the feeling. We can let the feeling come and we can let the feeling go. And just be here in a place of stillness and silence and bring our attention back to our breathing. And then we can just investigate what's really going on here. What's true for me in my own life? Each person has their own sense of truth. Each truth is something that we need to know about. This is how we share our knowledge. Everybody knows something. Nobody knows everything. We need to do this together. And you could take a little bit more of a deeper breath, and you could tap your knees, you could open your eyes, you could look around, you could stretch your arms. You could even imagine, what if we were a bunch of scientists in a think tank and presidents brought us together and said, solve this problem. And instead of sitting down and panicking and going, we don't know what to do, we could just say, what do we know is happening right now in the present moment? So I would ask you, how was that for you? What came up for you? And then you would report. You would say, just as an example, you would say whatever this was. This is what children are doing in schools now, all over our country. Not all over, but in many places. We're bringing mindfulness into education so that children can identify past the color or the gender or the religion or whatever, and experience a sense of powerful identification with thoughts, feelings, physical sensations in ways that make the unknown known, help the unfamiliar to become familiar. This is why children know how to do this. Adults are the ones that have a hard time doing it. Anyway, it's 7:59. If you have any comments or questions, we could ask them now. Tracy, is there anything you want to tell us about the conference? Or Dr. Iyengar, was there anything you wanted to offer as we move towards a close?
I just want to say that what Tracy and you have created is something that we need in all schools all over the world. So kudos to you. And I hope that I will get to learn a lot from you and the conference coming up, as well as take this activity and take this small thing that you shared, Barnaby. Hopefully, I'll be able to do it in my home with my kids and others as well. So thank you for sharing your practice. And Tracy, I think what you've created is super phenomenal. I'll be able to, I'm sure I can, spread it across, and hopefully many students will benefit from this coalition.